Hello, Tovani here. And moments ago, GGG released another news post announcing some big changes to Archnemesis Rare Monsters. This might get a little ranty, and I'd like to apologize in advance. Path of Exile is something I'm very passionate about and have been for years, and it's been a fairly disappointing week, so let's get into it. Unfortunately, GGG is not simply removing the rare monsters entirely. And look, I get it. GGG spent 3 months developing Archnemesis League, and another 3 months trying to pigeonhole it into every aspect of the game. It's a hobby project for someone, and they feel heavily attached to it. GGG has invested a lot of time into trying to force Archnemesis onto the player base, and at this point, they've sunk close to a year working on this change. However, at the end of the day, I don't think Archnemesis monsters make the game more fun to play. And I don't think Archnemesis monsters will make the game more fun to play in the future. But let's go ahead and take a look at what they have to say. In this community update, they reiterated what they've already said and what we've known from the start. GGG wants to make rare monsters more difficult and more challenging, with the intention that if you run into a particularly nasty Archnemesis monster, it should be able to kill you. They even flat out said that this is the point of Archnemesis, that if you get 2 mods that synergize with each other, the monster becomes incredibly dangerous. And I think this is absolutely annoying, as right before Archnemesis was introduced, they gave the players a lot of defensive tools. And now they've been nerfing player access to these tools, like spell suppression, while at the same time they've been adding in huge amounts of extra and unnecessary damage to monsters. What is the point of having defensive layers if they don't actually do anything? I totally agree that if you have 3k life, negative chaos resistance, 0 block or spell suppression, your character should probably just get deleted quite often, even in low tier maps. But the problem right now is that even if you have a fairly well-rounded character, with determination, grace, defiance banner, capped resistances, spell suppression, and ailment immunities, you're still quite likely to get killed by monsters in today's day and age. And this is absolutely ridiculous in my opinion. If you've invested so heavily into defensive layers, spending multiple divines and sacrificing offensive auras to play defensively, I don't think it's fair that basically 20 or 30 enemies in every single map is capable of 1 or 2-shotting you. Pinnacle and Uber bosses, sure. It totally makes sense for them to have super punishing mechanics, but they are slower, and they're well telegraphed. When you have a 200% movement speed Archnemesis monster with Leap Slam gunning you down inside a pack of 50 other monsters, how on earth are you supposed to react to that? Uber bosses at least give you the option to opt into challenging them. However, Archnemesis monsters are so pervasive throughout the entire game that you can't do anything, and I mean anything, without interacting with them. If GGG really wants to keep Archnemesis monsters as is, there are better ways of implementing it. For example, it could be a map mod, similar to what Beyond or Nemesis used to be. You could actively roll it on or off of your maps, and maybe even spec into it on your tree. Obviously, they would need to buff the loot quite significantly for this to work. Otherwise, who in their right mind would spec into Archnemesis? Another option I could see is potentially capping the number of modifiers on Archnemesis monsters to 2 by default, so that when you're in a T16 map, you only ever see 2 mod rare monsters. In addition to this, they would need to add 2 keystones into the game on the Atlas passive tree, one lowering this cap to 1, and the other increasing the cap to 3. This way players could opt out of multiple stacked Archnemesis monsters, or opt into even more Archnemesis modifiers. And GGG, if Archnemesis monsters really are as rewarding as you say they are, this shouldn't be a problem, right? Since surely everyone would opt for more modifiers on their monsters. Oh wait, they probably wouldn't, because dropping garbage rares and 1C uniques isn't incentive for killing monsters. Anyway, I wouldn't expect the damage levels to change anytime soon, as GGG has stated this is intended. However, There is some good news from this post. GGG has said that they will be nerfing the defensive modifiers on Archnemesis monsters. They acknowledge that while they want players to die from encounters with rare monsters, they recognize it's infuriating when you get a stack of defensive mods that makes the rare monster unkillable. Their stated goal here is that when two defensive Archnemesis modifiers stack on top of each other, the monster will no longer become incredibly slow to kill. So let's take a look at a few of these changes. Toxic is going to have less chaos resistance against dot damage. Chaos Weaver is no longer wither immune, and doesn't have max chaos resistance. This is good for some chaos builds. This is really good. Flame Weaver no longer has maximum fire resistance, or as high scorch reduction, and this should be good for builds like Righteous Fire. Frost Weaver no longer has maximum cold resistance, or cold ailment reduction, and this will be huge for brittle builds. Storm Weaver no longer has maximum lightning resistances, and it has less reduced effect of lightning ailments. This should be really good for my build, Lightning Conduit. And you can see the list goes on, mostly removing maximum resistances and lowering the ailment reduction that Archnemesis monsters have. They have also nerfed, or buffed, depending on how you look at it, the Pantheon Archnemesis modifiers, those really rare modifiers that are found as a 4th mod, such as Lunaris Touched, Arcali Touched, and Katava Touched, for example. Previously, these modifiers had incredibly high resistances to a single damage type, and this value has been more or less halved. However, they are now resistant to all types of damage instead of a specific one, and this should make these monsters collectively more difficult to kill for all builds. However, if you're a cold build, for example, it will be much easier to kill a Lunaris Touched monster. All in all, these defensive nerfs to Archnemesis monsters are a good change. But honestly, this should have been done last league. Another thing, and I recognize this won't apply to everyone, but this is an overwhelming nerf to Headhunter. Headhunter going into 3.19 was already in a terrible state. It got pretty gutted in 3.18, however, at least it allowed you to steal a lot of maximum resistances from rare monsters. And the belt was pretty much a defensive item rather than an offensive item like it had been in 3.17 and previous leagues. These changes to Archnemesis modifiers will probably be the nail in the coffin for Headhunter, as it won't even be useful for defenses anymore. And that is overwhelmingly sad. Also, all of these changes to Archnemesis don't address the biggest complaint the community is having this league: loot. I played for several hours after the unique and currency buff last night, and it doesn't really feel any better. You still get basically no currency, and all of the items dropping are still garbage. I guess sometimes you are getting like 30, 40 magic flasks or rare jewels per map, but come on. GGG, we're not going to be picking those up past the first day, as the odds of getting a good item from that is astronomically low. Don't get me wrong, these Archnemesis defensive changes outlined here are very good, and they are very much needed, but they have been needed since day one of 3.18 Sentinel League, and it's kind of disappointing that it's taken this long to address them, while at the same time we still don't have fixes for loot drops. GGG did note that they will be posting an explanation for what happened this week, and what all went wrong with the balancing process this league. So stay tuned for that. Anyway, thank you for watching, good luck with your league, if you're still playing, and I'll see you, hopefully, in the next one.